everybody. It's Bob Ost, and welcome to the Friday True Community Gathering. I think this is number 91, almost consecutive. I would say 91 consecutive, except we didn't do it on Christmas Day and New Year's Day of 2021. Crazy us. So we're here since April 17th, 2020, as a response to COVID, and we did it because we had to do it. I didn't embrace Zoom in the virtual world willingly. I had to have a natural disaster hit the planet for me to actually go on to Zoom. But what have I learned from this? I've learned that this is a perfectly viable and very important platform for all of us to get together. By having Friday Zoom gatherings every Friday since 2020, I've been able to not only bring people together in a room and meet each other and talk about what they're up to and doing, and help people to feel less isolated back when we were really isolated and there was no, I think we officially are off the mask mandate right now. I think it's either today or in the next couple of days. So it's really served an amazing purpose, and it's also helped True grow. I hadn't anticipated how well we would adapt to virtual. True itself, myself, and also us as a community. But we are now able to actually meet in a Zoom room and talk to people that are in Australia and Spain and England and the East Coast and the West Coast, and Lord knows, we're all over. We're all over the globe now, and I love that. And we're not going to stop doing that. We want to be able to offer a platform and an opportunity for people to come together from all over the world and talk about theater. So that means that we're becoming less New York centric. How about that? It's a good lesson for me. We also are able to change the topics a little bit now. Early on, we were talking specifically about creating during a shutdown, and we're just how to cope. A lot of it was how to cope. We're coming out of it now. I think we're heading into a little bit more of a normal world. I know that a lot of shows have reopened. It has not been easy. Broadway has definitely reopened, and though it has reopened, I'm not sure it has rebounded yet. So we're gonna talk about what's going on now in the outside world, the world outside of the Zoom room. So I want to welcome to the screen Aimee Todoroff from the League of Independent Theaters in New York, and Carla Hoke-Miller from the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. Let's start just being a little basic and talk about your where you work and what your companies do. Aimee, explain to us. Oh, and by the way, the topic today is politics and the arts. So in case you had any doubts about what we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about various things that are happening politically that are making the return of live theater viable and possible. We're also going to talk about what's not happening and what we really need to make happen so that we can come back to a normal world and a normal theater business. And we're also going to talk about what our role can be in all of this. We are artists, and a lot of us isolate ourselves in the arts. Sometimes you gotta speak out, though. Sometimes you gotta help make things happen, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, what it means to be political. So I'll shut up now, and I'm going to turn it over to Carla, because Carla wanted to comment on something that I was saying.
Can you hear me?
So welcome, Carla Hoke-Miller.
Thank you. I'm going to push it back to Aimee, but I just want to say about the mask mandate. That is a New York State mandate that's being lifted, not a New York City mandate. So we are still mandated to wear masks in the theater, in restaurants and gyms. It's not really any different right now. Proof of vaccination is still being insisted upon. And basically in 2 weeks, the school will have the school mandate will have an option to renew, and then we'll see what Hochul says about that. But what's happened most of the time during this pandemic is that we have followed suit under the state guidelines. The city has veered off for its own sake when it finds it necessary, but we are probably not far behind that.
Well, I just want to say that I'm all in favor of the mask mandate. I've been masking all along, and yet 4 weeks ago I went out with my actually legitimate medical mask, the 95, the N95, and didn't really interact with anybody much. Took my mask off when I was walking down the street and nobody was on the street. Put it back on, went to the bank, came home. 4 days later, I tested positive for COVID, and I was horribly ill for a day, and mildly ill for another day, and then fine. So everybody in this room, I urge you, especially if you have any kind of underlying medical conditions, stay with the masks for now, please. So let's go to Aimee now. And Aimee, talk about LIT, the League of Independent Theaters.
The League of Independent Theater is a 501c6 political advocacy organization. And the reason I stress that is because most of us know what it is to be a 501c3, but being a 501c6 means we are allowed to advocate for specific legislation and endorse candidates, all the things that get a little sticky when you're a 501c3. As an organization, we're allowed to sort of take that next step. We are an all-volunteer organization. We represent, at last count, which is constantly changing, 407 individual artists and 259 venues. I had to check the tally off screen there, but that's the most recent. I also would like to uplift Bob's words of wisdom about wearing a mask. Over the holiday season, I also tested positive for COVID, and it was significant. I am a relatively healthy individual, and I still was quite ill for a number of days, and it took about a month for full recovery. So trying to walk that line between really warning people to take this seriously while also encouraging people that, I am back at it. I'm recovered and up and running. But the day before I tested positive, I spent a number of hours with my 82-year-old colleague who kept getting very close to me, and I kept having to say, push back. And I believe it is the mask that saved him from getting very seriously sick. He remained negative. So the masking, I think, is something that I know can be challenging for some audience members, but I think most audience members understand that it is a very necessary inconvenience for us all to be gathered in an intimate space together. So I, as well, am a big fan of the mask mandate, and I don't think that most theaters will be lifting that mandate anytime soon, even if the New York City does decide that they're going to not have such definitive rules about it. And I'm sure Carla can speak more to this. My sense is that most theaters will choose to continue to have their own rules around masking, which include wearing the mask and being vaccinated in the space.
I just want to say that I don't know for a fact that everybody in this room believes in masks, and I don't know if anybody is an anti-vaxxer or what. There may be people out in YouTube who watch us. Don't resent us for this. Understand that we're making a choice that we feel is best for us, and we have a hard time understanding the other side of it, just like the other side of it has a hard time understanding us. And that's basically what's wrong with the entire world, is that we're very divided, more divided now than we ever have been, and very unwilling to grasp the reality of the opposing positions, which is where politics really gets to embroiled and hot and nasty.
With theater, Bob, I would just say with theater, we do have to think about the health of the performers. And every time one performer gets sick and there's not a sub, the show gets canceled. And it's an ongoing problem for people in short staff shortages and all kinds of equity rules. And so for us, especially in the small theater world, when you're in an audience and you're this far away, you want to make sure you're not the one giving something to that performer that is performing for you after all this time. So that's another facet of the theater aspect of continuing to wear them.
And again, because I don't know who's out there watching this, I ask you to just open up your hearts and your minds and just understand that we're not trying to do anything to harm you or take away your freedoms, but it's just a matter of us all living together on this planet in the best way possible, so that we don't inadvertently inflict pain on someone else.
I did want to point out that Carla has sort of elegantly brought up a point of tension that is something we all are navigating, and we're all trying to navigate it with grace. But the difference between what is true and what might be best practices in the state versus what is in New York City. And I know not everyone on this call is in New York City right now. And so a lot of the things that Carla and I will talk about, because it is our knowledge base, is New York City based. And so when we're talking about mask mandates in New York City, that might be very different than the reality that someone's seeing on the ground in Buffalo or in Syracuse. And I think it was very smart to bring up the fact that the mask mandate that was lifted was the state mask mandate, and things just might necessarily be different in New York City. We see that a lot, actually.
And we're 9 million people compressed on 13 miles. I mean, it has a lot to do with density of population too.
Well, Carla, let's go back to the basic intro, and let me ask you about the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment and what you guys do there, and how it might be of use to the rest of us, so that we can get to know you better.
Okay, well, we're the office that is kind of the industry-facing office and new initiatives office, considered more economic development on that side of it, rather than the grant-making arm, which is New York, which is the Department of Cultural Affairs, and some of the other offices that augment together. Department of Transportation is doing a lot of arts-related activities now with the open streets and the open restaurants. And then SAPO, which in the street activities permitting office, and the citywide permits that run the open culture, which allows people to get a very inexpensive permit and perform even competitively for consecutively and charge a fee for tickets, and which was kind of announced when all the venues were closing down and people didn't have a way to make a living, basically. And it was a way of saying the city opening up something they heretofore had never done before. And so some of these things are becoming permanent, which is, on the one hand, it's incredibly wonderful. And those streets that would not have been activated at all have been activated by this. But it causes a lot of urban problems with throughways and pedestrians and bike lanes and bus lanes. And for us, with the film office being part of our office, we do the film permitting, and we run the broadcast station Channel 25, and we have other portfolios like digital content, publishing, advertising. But primarily theater was mostly, but anyway, it causes some problems with where the trucks are going to park, and now they're making more pedestrian malls. So it's all kind of a question of coordinating with our allies, and a lot of the staff through the transition. The managerial staff has stayed quite the same, and the deputy mayors that have been appointed by the new mayor have experience in both the Bloomberg and de Blasio administrations. There's a lot of through lines. Our deputy mayor for the first time has an art and culture advisor who was the chief of staff to my commissioner, who's moved over there. So that's a direct line for us to try to get to the deputy mayor, who will then inform the mayor. So it's a shortcut that didn't exist before. So that's exciting. So we're pretty much operating.
Can I ask you, let's break this down a little in practical terms. So if somebody has an idea for doing a theatrical piece that is that is such and such, who do they go to? So we talked about street theater. We talked about the Department of Transportation. Actually didn't realize that the licenses that we have to actually go to the Department of Transportation to get licenses. How about if somebody wants to do something in parks and outdoor theater? Who
Yeah.
do they turn to?
Now that's the Parks Department. And as you all know, I mean, for those of you that have been on this call when I've been on, and those of you that haven't, that want to do something in New York City, the Parks Department also has permitting. And they weren't doing a lot of that because it was used for recreational and vocational services during the pandemic, as well as tents and, extended hospital beds. It was really utilitarian at that point, and they were shying away from that, which meant we needed to open the streets. And that's kind of how that started to get generated, as well as the call from groups like Lit, who have always advocated for a much more lenient and user-friendly way of taking advantage of the outdoor spaces in our cities. And so that could just go through me and I'll put you to the right person, because basically there's a permit that is specific to Parks Department for anything in the parks. The neighborhood parks, there's a borough chief of each, a parks borough chief, that then there's one overall special projects person that tries to coordinate all the thousands and thousands of things going on in the parks across the city. And then there's borough chiefs assigned to each borough. And so it's kind of a granular process of getting to the right person and then saying, this person needs some help with their permit. Can you help them? Can you get on a call with them? Try to present something that isn't so easy, a little more complicated, or there are more questions about. I can direct those kinds of calls.
I'm just you raised a question for me. A Little Island, the new Little Island, and all of the art that goes on there. Does one connect with them through them or through any of the commissions?
They're private. They're private. And I think they are actually looking for an artistic director right now, a programming director. So I'm not sure who the contact is, but I can find out who would be the best person to contact. But they're private. But I've had friends that do site-specific work that have been, happily engaged there. And so it's often through a bid or through, a business improvement district, or so you have an advocate going in. I think the more you can do for the largest amount of public good, that's why we cover festivals and cluster people that have their regular programming at one time, and we make it into a festival. So being paid with public funds and spending public funds, we can justify reaching out to a lot of people and helping a lot of people at once. And we try to alternate what we do constantly. So
Aimee, Aimee, I think that you have. Sorry about that, Aimee. I think that you have your finger on the pulse of all sorts of different aspects of the arts that are going on in the city. Give us a little overview of what people are doing and what is, if anything's changed, because we've been through the 2 years of shutdown and people returning to old ways of doing things. What's going on with people?
Oh gosh.
It's a big question. You could answer any part of that you'd like.
I would like to, first of all, uplift something that has been put in the chat. The Little Island did have an open call for submissions when it first opened, and I believe that they will continue to do so periodically. I know, as Carla pointed out, the leadership is in flux, but they did have a very big, generous open call, and you could submit, but it is private, which brings me to a point that I think Carla also was getting to and is a really wonderful partner for, is that we think about public space in our popular imagination as just all the same thing as public space, but each public space is organized by a different department of, Parks Department. There's some beautiful places that are run by the Department of Environmental Protection, and figuring out, once you've located a space that you want to perform in, particularly an outdoor space, figuring out the best way to access that space can be really challenging. which is why I'm going to make a quick pitch to get to know your council member and to get to know people like Carla in the mayor's office of media and entertainment. The council just was, we have a whole new council. There was a huge amount of turnover. And I think for the first time ever, more than half the council are brand new people. So that's exciting, but that also means that the council members stepping in that represent your district might not know you. They might not have the history with you. But if you reach out and form a relationship with them, I'll put a link in the chat that will let you know how you can find your council member. They can help guide you through things like, oh, there's this space. I want to work in this space. Oh, is that a plaza? Is that a park? Is that, who do I talk to? Is that part of a business improvement district? Like, how do I access that? And then they can put you in touch with wonderful people like Carla, who's always been, I just gotta say, such a help getting the open culture process together and created a very smooth application process. But working with the city government can be complicated. So I'm making a pitch, get to know your city council member. In terms of what's going on and what we've learned, there is a general slowing down, I think, in terms of pace of how we create work, of taking care of individuals as artists, as opposed to looking at them as commodities, which sometimes means stopping the process a little bit earlier when you're creating work and taking more time with things, which is just a general healthy thing for the overall environment of theater to begin with, but also just in terms of taking care of our own physical health. One of the things that we talk about quite a lot in the independent theater community is how expensive space is. And I think most people know real estate in New York that's the number one expense. On any budget, you're going to spend the most on your space. But then the added expense of you're going to need additional rehearsal time. You're going to need more time because everything is slowing down a little bit to create safer space. And we don't want to go back to rushing through a rehearsal process just to get it done. We want to continue to be careful and thoughtful and to take a little extra time to build in cushions for what if one of your cast members tests positive. You need to have maybe a few extra weeks, more time in the space to slowly ramp up and to be more flexible about things. So I think that is one thing that has changed. And I also think, Bob, as you were alluding to in the beginning, I think virtual theater is here to stay. And I think across all levels of independent theater up to Broadway, people are doing wonderful creative things that embrace the virtual and live event. And one thing that we've learned and that I really love saying out loud is that we've shown that streaming theater does not decrease the appetite for live theater. And in fact, it increases the appetite for live theater. So they aren't these competing art forms. They're actually complements that increase the overall appetite for people to see shows.
Sorry, that's great to hear. Thank you for saying that. I kind of feel that way too, although I still know a lot of people who have rejected the virtual medium from day one of the shutdown and still don't want to look at it. And it frustrates me because they're missing so many wonderful opportunities, not just opportunities, but ways of developing new work that weren't as that we didn't know about. I guess it's always been accessible. We just didn't know how to use it before. And I think people have learned how to use it. And I think it's a shame if people turn away from this. I know people are, I've got guys in my Zoom room right now. I have people that are begging me to take everything back to live programming. And I just don't feel that that's the way to go. My gut says I want to have some live programming, but I think that staying here in the virtual platform it's just the way it's what's going to be with us from here on. It just is. It's not going away. Um, so Connor, I just want to let you know that you have permission to speak up if somebody asks a question in the chat that I don't see. Um, let's 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 just say that, okay, what's going on with commercial theater and Broadway doesn't necessarily affect most of us in terms of our careers and what we're doing. It is good to know anecdotally what is going on, and obviously that the mask mandate is staying in theater, but it also is going to be staying in off Broadway and showcase off Broadway world too. As far as if we want to be smart about it, we need to keep that. Let's. Is there anything else, Carla, that you would want to add to or either of you would like to add to the overview of what's going on in theater and all levels of theater right now as a result of us making a transition from shutdown into potential for live performance? Because after that, I want to talk about politics. So let's do this first. Oh, you're muted. I'll take either one of you off mute.
Okay. I think Omicron threw everyone for a loop. We support Jan Arts NYC, which we created along with APAP, and pulled in 9 festivals, 9 to 13, that are various festivals, from Prototype and Under the Radar to some convenings through international groups, and lots of things that were supposed to be in person. And some at the last minute in January that had scheduled things in early January canceled or postponed to the next year.
Under the Radar was one of the ones that canceled.
It had to cancel completely. They couldn't pivot. So I think everyone is being very careful right now to move too quickly, as Aimee was alluding to, in even the development of work, but also we're dealing with visas, we're dealing with state regulations that vary, we're dealing with travel regulations that vary across the board, we're dealing with unknown variants that might be on the horizon. And I think everyone is just trying to be very cautious. And so the virtual piece has to keep going. And I do think people have found new revenue streams with it. I think that it's good for informing people. It's better than just a conference call where you're talking all over each other and nobody can see who's talking, or know if they don't know the voice, they can't differentiate. I think it's been an interesting concept there, and a lot of people are developing deeper VR experiences, and those are coming from the gaming industry, which is merging with all the multimedia. And I think it's always going to make for interesting theater. But just as far as Broadway goes, it's still the safety issue is really big. The perception of people coming into the city and people living in the city in the metropolitan area is that Times Square still is not safe. The thing about New York City is it's very safe because the lights are always on and there's a ton of people on the street. And that's really, I mean, the police force, of course, is essential, but it's really that element. And there's people packed on the subways and you're not alone in a dark corner. It's something about the city that makes it uncommonly safe in that regard, considering how many people live here. So we're trying to get back to that. And there's lots of empty retail spaces around Times Square. There's lots of empty spaces around in Midtown particularly, but all over the city. And so there's a lot of initiatives that are being bounced around about how we can help. And one of the things that I'm doing right now is checking to see all the surveys that are out there, because I know there's a survey fatigue. Trying to pinpoint what we don't know, like who fell through the cracks when they applied for this funding mechanism or this grant, and why did they fall through? Because they had the wrong tax code number, or because they weren't recognized as being part of the ecosystem of theater, like the costume shops, and trying to get in deeper and get ideas from people themselves, from the industry, as we have always depended on Aimee and Lit for guidance in so many areas all along the way, which has been amazing partnership we've had. And also Art New York and a lot of the membership organizations that crisscross, and the Off-Broadway League, and of course the Broadway League, and all of the others, as well as individual artists. But it's what do you need right now? And how can we direct the resources that we might put into live productions that we've done in the past? How can we filter that in? Because we're not a grant making arm, but we have initiatives that we can tailor around what people really need. For instance, during the height of the pandemic, when it first slammed everyone, we were able to augment the grants that Department of Cultural Affairs was giving to the theaters that were in the areas that were the hardest hit. And so they were small grants, but we were able to give 25 of them out, $10,000 grants, to supplement what Department of Cultural Affairs was giving. And those groups are the ones that are historically getting smaller grants to begin with. They're getting smaller amounts of money. But, and you know, because we have a new administration, we have new borough presidents, as well as new council people, it's going to be an education on all of our parts to tell them who we are, why we're important, and what we expect. And part of that is really letting them know that this theater world is not just Broadway, as people coming in may think.
That's the problem. I mean, we have a new mayor who is wholeheartedly in support of the arts, but he only sees as far as Broadway. He doesn't.
We're going to teach him. His people know. His people that work for him know, though. So we'll get to him.
I want to jump on something that we mentioned before, but was basically the importance of virtual for the ongoing development and nurturing of theater and new works. So, Aimee, you may know more about this than I do. I have the basic belief that I've learned in the past year and a half that you do things a little different when you're doing theater virtually. And without getting into the discussion of if it's virtual, is it theater? If it's not live, is it theater? Let's not go there yet. But considering that you want to develop something, my belief and my understanding and what I've learned is that you really need to involve a technologist, somebody who understands the technology from day one. I do know some people who want to do things live. They want to do readings live, and we've done that too. So there's basically two ways of going. You can actually jump in, take a chance that your Wi-Fi is not gonna fail, and do something that's live, which is normally would be a reading, I guess. Or you can record things, and then in post-production you can edit it into what is essentially is filmed theater. In your experience, who's doing what? I mean, are people split about that, or is there a trend in one way or the other?
Bob, I gotta say, since the pandemic began, I have done projects that tick every single one of those boxes. I've directed a brilliant project for COPE, which is an organization that works with bereaved youth, and we filmed a live play over Zoom. We performed it, but then recorded it live and broke it into segments to use for drama therapy. I've directed staged readings over Zoom, and I've done a live performance. I'm working on a few live staged readings that will go up at the Chain and with Emerging Artist Theater coming up in the next month. So
say hi to Paul for me.
It's all happening, and I think, like most artists, we pick up the tools that are in front of us. There are some projects, the project with COPE that I told you about with the bereaved youth would not have worked as well as a one-off Zoom reading, but we were able to use this technology in a way that will serve in ongoing into the future. But I really feel like this is not a matter of having to choose one or the other. There's always evolving technology. I think that there's always more considerations when more technology comes into what is available to artists. Then that opens up things like screen managers. That is a job that didn't exist 2 years ago. And now it is a whole discipline. People are specializing in it. So I think that it's just a matter of choosing the medium that works best for the thing you want to do. Sometimes, as you've proven, you can have an incredible reach by doing something virtually. And I know people who have participated in virtual theater festivals all over the world during the pandemic. But I also know people who absolutely will not do their plays in this medium because it doesn't serve them. So I feel like we're all artists. We use the tools we have.
Okay, so basically, what we could basically say is that the toolbox is bigger than it's ever been, and
Yes.
it's available for all of us to use if we choose to or not. And you're also saying that you can work in any number of ways in virtual medium, live or recorded or a combination of both. So I hope everybody knows that when you decide you're going to do a project and you start thinking about how you're going to do it, you have a lot of choices now. So just think of it as having a lot of choices. I get frustrated with my friends who just never want to see, they just never want to go do anything on Zoom. They never want to go into a Zoom room. Look at us now. I mean, look at the 37 of us who are in the room right now. It's not such a bad thing. I don't think it's such a bad thing. I guess the people who think it was a bad thing have already left. So let's turn for a second to the whole issue of advocacy in politics. I'm a political person by nature, and yet running a not-for-profit, I can't be as overtly political as my instincts might want me to be otherwise. So you had talked about 501c6 versus 501c3. Hi, I'm a 501c3. Hello, 501c6. Tell us what you can do that I can't do.
We can endorse candidates, which is a big thing. We can flat out say, I endorse this candidate. You should vote for this candidate because this candidate is an arts-friendly candidate and has expressed a desire to support our community. That is something that you really can't do as a 501c3. We can also host events, political events that are purely political, meet the candidates forums. We can speak directly to candidates and say, this is what I want. I want direct artist pay to go, I want access to space. Like I want this legislation. We can go so far as to say this piece of legislation, Intro 1796, commercial rent stabilization, that will help theaters. And so we want you to sign on to it. We endorsed you. Now we expect you to support the legislation that we have identified that will help our community. I'm sorry, it's New York.
It's just ambient noise.
Ambient noise.
I would put it into the background soundscape if it weren't there, so it's okay.
Yeah. And we can also, as Carla knows well, we can work with city agencies to, in some cases, propose legislation and say, we think this is a good idea, or if not legislation, a program, and say, hey, we've found this this hole in the net. How can we help knit that hole together and then work with organizations and departments, I guess, like the mayor's office in media and entertainment to help shore up the net. I have to say that there's so much love in the chat for the City Artist Corps, and that was such a successful program. And I'm certainly not saying that LIT made that happen, but organizations like LIT, who are advocates, who got together in Zoom rooms and said, what do we really, really need? And came up with bullet points with our shared knowledge and got those bullet points to people like Carla, who I know worked hard on it. And even though that was a grant program that came through DCLA, I know that he was very active in making sure that came together in a way that was accessible to as many people as possible. We can do that. Whereas if I was running my own theater company, I could go to my council member and say, hey, we would really like discretionary funds. And I could ask for grants from the DCLA, but I couldn't advocate for specific legislation. I couldn't I couldn't endorse a specific candidate for office.
I just want to say that when I had Eric Botcher, and also I had other candidates for city council on different panels,
Yeah.
our conversation was never about directly about politics. It was basically about. I was able to have them, I think, because I wasn't implying that I was endorsing Eric as a candidate. I was just having him with other people like Carla talk about what needs to happen politically, what are some programs that we might want to see happen, and I think it was a relatively gentle conversation, and not overtly endorsing anyone. If I'm wrong, somebody better tell me, because I'm going to do it again, because I plan on having Julia Menon and Eric Botcher back for a conversation about what's going on with the arts and what needs to happen. And what is
why
possible.
Julie would be so perfect. And I know Aimee is good friends with her and had a colleague of hers for a long time as well. And she was the commissioner of our office for about a year, and we got all kinds of things that had been languishing off and started and fire under them. And Aimee was a large part of that too, and her advocacy work for the things that we did. But it's she has been appointed the head of the committee for small businesses, and we are advocating every single day that theater is a small business. And so it's a huge boon to have her. And I told her we were doing the survey, and she wants to do a roundtable after, and we'll probably do a report that follows that's not unlike the 2019 report that we commissioned, to find out exactly where we are and how things are different. And models from all over the world have appeared. One of the thanks, to virtual. We've really been able to tap into what other cities and states and countries are doing. And even though our political makeup is very different, like I wish we were more like London. I wish we had national theater, and I wish we had subsidies, and I wish we had the dole, because we saw that a lot of people were much better off. And isn't that what we want? But anyway, that's simplifying very complicated stuff. But I do think that what one of the things that Aimee is talking about that has made her group so incredibly effective is their tough questions they ask the candidates. We get to sit in and listen to what they're saying and try to help formulate a city policy that is more inclusive of the things that come up, and also pay attention very closely to their answers to see if they really are committed, and to find out if they're for real about the things. And then we can task them with that later and say, I was at this meeting and I heard you say this, and what are you going to do? Let's do this together. But it also to give government ideas coming from you, bullet point, simplified. I mean, the white paper that NEVA did was the whole reason that shuttered venues happened. They were smart enough to pull their members together, get it done on their own, figure out what they wanted to message, and then get it to the right people, message it out so that those people could leverage the messaging across city, state, funding, foundations, across the board, all the way up to the federal level.
I have one gripe that's been with me for a long time. It bothers me. I mean, I understand that politicians are doing things that are supportive and useful for us as an arts business. I never hear them talk about the arts. It drives me crazy. I listen to speech after speech about everything that needs to happen and all the problems that we're having, and the this and the that. The closest thing I ever hear to a conversation where a politician is acknowledging the arts is it always winds up being Broadway,
or tourism,
tourism, which
I mean,
is
that's
broader.
making them pay attention now.
Yeah. So how do we get politicians to embrace what we do enough so that it's second nature of them to mention it when they're talking about what's right or wrong with the world? Aimee, you're nodding. So what do you have to say?
I'm nodding because this is so much of what any advocacy organization does, but particularly what LIT does, which LIT was founded in 2008. And the main goal was just, we just want a politician to say indie theater. That's it. That's all we want. I am going to push back a little bit on you, Bob. I've heard Eric Botcher will talk about the arts. It's starting to come up. It is.
But that's because I had this conversation with him.
Well, he was Corey's guy too. He was Corey's chief of staff. So.
And so that is the answer. You're having conversations with him. So then he will go on Pix 11 to talk about the economy. And one of the things that will come up for him when talking about revitalizing the economy is indie theater, and how theater will, like a small business, like a mom and pop, it increases healthy street traffic. It puts money right back into the economy. We've gotten, over time, every mayoral candidate to say the phrase indie theater, and many of them will talk about how indie theater is an economic anchor for their neighborhood. We are really pushing forward the idea, as Carla said, that theaters are small businesses, particularly mom and pop theaters, and that the smaller theaters are important. Broadway, super important. Smaller theaters are also important because they tend to service a neighborhood. And whatever neighborhood they are in, they raise the overall economic profile, and they are able to provide art at a price point that is much more accessible to a large number of people. So you've shown how it works. This is the link. You have more conversations. You talk to your council member. You go to every meeting you can. And if you say it 3 or 4 times, then your council member will start to repeat it back, and it will start to become a priority for them. But also, as Carla
sound
pointed
bites.
Out, we will give them
we're
good
hammering. We've been hammering for like 40 years on this. But
everybody in the room, we're really talking to each one of you, all 33 of you that are here with us right now. It's important that you talk about it and get the word out. Get to know, like you said, get to know your city council members and other people that are. That's the thing. I think a lot of us are intimidated. We're afraid to call a politician. Where it's like, oh, they don't want to hear from me. They may not, but you know what? You call them anyway.
Well, this is what you should call them. Is you should say they're government workers. There are very few that are real politicians. The ones that go all the way through and go up. But there are a lot of local government people that work in city government. It's like 370,000 people in this city that work in city government, and that includes fire and police and sanitation and all of the huge enterprises as well. But that's a lot. And the representation, especially with New York and in the way that it thinks about city government, most of the people in city government have a really wide background of experience and lots of different levels, lots of different cultures, lots of different upbringings and schooling and education. And it takes all kinds. It's almost like the fabric of the city is really represented in the government people. So the people that are the politicians, they're going to be stepping stones and moving along and going up to whatever their final goal is. But there are a lot of people that once they're through with city government, they'll go into the foundation world and do a lot of good because of the networking and the people that they know and the contacts they've made and the issues that they understand. So they are very approachable. They love attention, or they wouldn't be elected officials, right? So they will respond to you because they have to. You are paying our salaries, and we can't say, oh, I'm not going to take that phone call. And if they do, you find a way in and just let me know, and I'll get you to talk to them.
There you go. There are a lot of comments.
If I can.
There are a lot of comments in there.
As Carla pointed out, most of the people in city government are city government workers. They're there because they care. it's not a glamorous job, and they actually really do want to hear from you. Nothing makes a council member happier than a constituent coming up to them and saying, hey, I have a problem, can you help me? And then them being able to help you. Give them a call. They love it.
I have to tell you, that's so true. Before I moved to where I am now,
Especially the new
I lived,
ones.
before I moved to where I am now, I lived on 104th Street. I was right down the street from Danny O'Donnell. And
Oh, he's
that office, I just had to like say a word, and all of a sudden they were like on it. Anything I asked them to do, they would bend over backwards to help me. So yeah, I think that all of us need to know that when we call these offices, a lot of us think that we're going to get the runaround, but most of them really do want to help us. So I'm going to
and
try
they
to.
have a big budget, and they have a big impact on the city budget. So you can ask, they have discretionary funds, they have money, they can move things around, they can change a lot
Well,
on the ground.
the key figures we all should know is we need to know our city council member for the district that we're in, and for me it was the state assembly. Danny O'Donnell was the state assemblyman for New York, and
Hmm.
he was very helpful. Their office was
Yeah.
always very helpful. So let's not be afraid of politicians there.
And community board too is very local, and whenever you do an event somewhere on an open culture street or an open street, and you're in another borough doing it, we always advise that you talk with your local business improvement district that controls that area, and also the community board, so that they know what you're doing, because they're the first ones to say, let me send out flyers, let me reach out to all my constituents and tell them to come to your event. And it's also just kind of a neighborhood grace, and that's happened a lot since the streets have been opened up. It's opened up a lot of formerly more closed doors, I think.
Well, I just found out why Connor's not reading all questions to me. He's not here, so I have to go check the. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that people are talking about.
There haven't been a lot of questions.
Oh, you are here. I couldn't find you.
Hi. No, there haven't been a whole lot of really good discussion about sort of considering art as commerce.
Yeah, I wanted to pull some of those out and have Aimee and Carla address them. There were like Catherine Keats says, politicians don't consider artwork or artists people who contribute to the workforce, so they do not speak to us because do they really need our vote? But art is work, and I know that you have already talked to trying to convince her otherwise. But do you want to say anything else to Catherine about this? Or do you feel that that's there's some truth in what she's saying? Politicians don't consider artwork
to support the arts could be people working backstage in a theater, scenic designers, so the people that we are running workforce programs to encourage more inclusion and diversity in those areas, front and back and center of all the arts and the stages. And we're seeing the heads of institutions change now. We're seeing they're pulling younger people that have been trained and in paid training programs that we've funded are pulling in their peers and their colleagues to then become the new ones, the new workers that come in. So I think that there are changes brewing. It's actually been pushed forward the way that virtual and technology has been pushed forward by the pandemic. So have these changes that were just languishing in the sidelines and people saying, yeah, I'm doing it. Well, there's not really a choice not to act anymore. And so I think it's all becoming visible on a lot of different levels. And we also know that there's big staff shortages. There's people that, are going to be kind of coming into industries at a higher level than they would if they had to compete with with thousands of other people that wanted the same job. So it's a hardship because they demand higher pay. We want that for them, but we know it's a hardship for people that are strapped already and companies. But I think that there is an awareness that there is an art maker and a theater maker and the people behind that are creating new industries and new jobs that new generations will come into just to keep New York what it is. So I think there is a recognition of that. I don't know,
Yeah.
Aimee, if you think.
I wanted to pull back up the idea that, you talked about your offices doing a survey, and we all have survey
Right.
fatigue, but it is so important because, as you mentioned, that economic impact report from 2019, that was before the pandemic. And even then, this report that your office commissioned, I have to look over at my stats, $1.3 billion in economic output is created for this city by small theater alone. That's not even talking about the whole sector. That's just talking about the mom and pop theaters. And having an economic impact report for after the COVID crisis would be an incredibly useful tool to be able to say, hey, our sector is incredibly valuable. And if you want these neighborhoods to thrive, you need to start investing back into our industry so that our industry can lift up these neighborhoods as well. But I also think, as Carla mentioned, there's a real movement towards thinking of artists as arts workers. The City Artist Corps grant was, I think, a great first step. And one of the things that's really encouraging is that, at least from what we're hearing and the feedback we're getting, it's sort of a universally loved program. I have not heard a single negative. No council member, no politician has said, it wasn't great. Everybody has said, this is a win for everyone. So if we could get some momentum behind that by expanding the City Artist Corps grant, expanding it to potentially venues, so that venues can access a City Artist Corps grant as well, because right now it is tailored specifically for individual artists, which we love, and that is great. We would never want to lose that aspect of it. But then maybe also moving into space grants, all kinds of things that the city could do. And I do feel like there is some momentum. Somebody, again, the chat is so strong. Someone pointed out that we do sort of have a moment. I think people have realized during the pandemic how much artists do contribute to our, not just our mental health and our spiritual health and our neighborhoods and our culture and our society, but our economic health as well. And so there's so much happening in my space. I hope nobody else can hear that, but
No.
good. I think that there is a real opportunity to push forward this idea of artist workers. Arts organizations are small businesses, because politicians understand that. They understand that small businesses are a powerful sector. And if we can get their ear and keep talking to them, this is part of the education component. An entire basically the whole new city council is new. So we need to talk to all of them as much as we possibly can. And even just saying, hey, I'm an artist. I live in your district. I need you to support arts is a useful thing as well.
I will say that my conversations with Eric Botcher, he has expressed a deep love of the arts. I mean, it's not, he doesn't look at it just as a business and just as commerce. And although I do agree that it's probably smart for us to be able to talk about it from the business point of view for politicians, I don't want to give up on the possibility that there are an ample number of politicians who have a deep passion for the arts and a love for what we do. I'm sure they're there. I haven't met a lot of them, but I'm sure they're there. I want to actually. Oh, we got four more minutes. Let's see what else comes in. So, it's terribly annoying. However, they are absolutely right. Learning to speak political speak to show that we are just as economically impactful as other small businesses, and even having to ingratiate oneself to the political leaders when they are on the opposite political viewpoint from ourselves. It's still important. Yeah, I mean, I think basically what we're all sort of leaning towards agreeing about is that art is wonderful. Art is our passion. We all love the arts. Everyone who's here loved the arts, and that it would be nice if that were enough. And with some people, when we talk about the arts, it strikes an emotional chord with them. But if we are aware of the business component, if we're aware of the statistics that make this a commercially viable as well as artistically viable business, we have a better chance of being heard by politicians who might not listen otherwise. So.
Yeah.
And of course, true. Here I am. I run an organization that basically focuses on the business side of the arts anyway. So I shouldn't have any trouble with this idea at all.
So many elected officials that we will have meetings with, we just take a meeting because we want to get to know them and we want to press them on our agenda. And then one of the first things that comes out of their mouth is, I love the arts. The arts means so much to me. I just don't know how to support it. I don't know what everybody wants to support the arts. So it is up to us to tell them how. But then other times we will meet with somebody who we think we have absolutely nothing in common with. And then we'll find out that one thing they really care about is recidivism and the jail system and fixing that pipeline and talking to them about how art can do that. So sometimes it's just a matter of being smart and thinking about what you know that politician really cares about and showing them how art is valuable to that. But for the most part, you really just need to tell your politician or your representative, I'm an artist, I live in your district, this is what I want. And you don't even need to come up with the solution to your problem. It's their job to help come up with the solution. But if you reach out to them and say, hey, I run a space and I'm having problem with Con Ed, I should be getting nonprofit rates and I'm not getting them. That's what your city council member can do for you. There's a million other examples, but you don't need to have the answer. You just need to reach out to them and let them know that you're here.
If I may, hi guys.
Hi, Connor.
Hi.
Hi, Connor.
Hi. So Glenn Borders had a question about independent producers who work with theaters but sort of act as their own entities, and he's wondering about that.
I guess the question is how does he as an independent producer fit into the small business model that you were talking about? I think he does. I think that if you're an independent producer, first of all, you should have an LLC or something, or some sort of entity that separates you out as an actually active business. If you don't, consider doing that. But nevertheless, as an independent producer, you're creating an opportunity, and John Lant will testify to this too. You're creating opportunities of employment for a lot of people. So I think that we're going back to one of the basic premises of small business. It's an entity that offers work to other people and offers the possibility of there being income and commerce that's happening around you. So sure, I think you can consider yourself a small business. Carla, can you clarify what I'm saying more?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things to note too in the report we did in 2019 was that there's 750 theater organizations, and we did include off-Broadway all the way down to indie theaters. And there are 600 theater companies at that time, and there were, I think, 155 venues, and and so it was split in a way that a lot of those are individual artists that were putting things together. And one of the things that we have tried to do is promote their work. And so when we had done All New York's a Stage promotion, where we listed everybody that had something going on in October, and if they didn't have anything going on, we still listed their website and tried to draw people to their neighborhood theaters and recognize that they walked by them every day, but they didn't go in. And we think there's been a lot of play. People are really going to see a lot of things locally now, especially with the pandemic, where the center is kind of not the center in the same way. But I do think producers have a particularly hard time. I did hear something really interesting I'm going to look into. Glenn, you'll be interested to know. There used to be apparently in the 60s and 70s, there was a city incentive for high risk industries where they would give either a tax credit or actually some kind of rebate, something that was somewhat considered generous to people that were like people that were investing in high risk areas. And it kind of gives me an idea. I'm going to look into what existed and think about it as shaping something we might do for all of theater is high risk, and all the people that risk it are doing it in a way that is providing employment, which is providing, we can promote the finished product, and we can promote like the Women's Fund, which actually helps people apply to finish their work if they haven't finished it, and things like that. But I think there needs to be some kind of, we're not going to get a national program at this point, but I do think that that could be something we can now work with the state and NISCA and the foundations and the federal government. It seems to me that we could come up with some kind of leveraging of programs that would, kind of pay attention to those really significant, the importance of those significant skill sets and the work that you all are doing out there. When you feel you're just in a vacuum, if you can pull together a group of independent producers, I know that there's the women's group that has been pulled together, the women in, WIFG group, and there's 37 members, I think, now that meet weekly, and started during the pandemic with 7 people, and they talk about the same kind of issues. Glenn, I don't know if you'd be able to join. I think you might have to start the men's side of that and then come join the two. but it is, they talk about the same kind of issues of how do producers keep producing when there's not much support for them through grants and other systems.
And just FYI, there is a League of Independent Producers in London, which basically is exactly what Carla is suggesting that we do here. So you're lit and they're lip. So there we go. I've kept you here longer than I said I was going to keep you. I hope that you're okay about that, and I hope that you know how much I appreciate you being with us, both of you, Aimee and Carla. I'm going to wrap up now and give everybody who wants to an opportunity to go into breakout rooms. If either of you can stay and meet people, that would be great. If you can't, I understand. But this is my wind-up speech. So I want to just say to everybody here, thanks for being with us today. I hope you'll come with it and join us next week. For the next 2 weeks, we're going to actually be talking about musicals. For those handful, those slightly like small group of you that love musicals, which is like everybody. So we're going to be talking about them next week with Joe Barros of New York Theater Barn, and also Aaron Sully from Musical Theater Factory. And then the following week, we're going to talk about production opportunities that are offered by Main Street Musicals with Tim Jerome and NMI, which is John Sparks. I have things also planned for March. I'll tell you about them later. Hope to see you next week. Hope to see you in 2 weeks. YouTube viewers, thank you for being with us if you've joined us. Everybody, if you're not a subscriber to the True Stat channel, I say this every week, we get perks. We get some sort of perk once we have 1,000 subscribers to YouTube. So we're at about 160 now. So we have a ways to go. We need you. We need you. Also, we do a lot of what we do for free, or we offer it because we're in a time that's been a time of struggle for so many people. Happy to have you come for free. Would be very appreciative of anybody who would give a donation to True. It's True Donate, truedonate.com. It's trudonate.com, and go there and give us what you can if you can, and help us keep running. That's it for tonight, and I might go cook dinner and open up breakout rooms so you can meet each other.